Even in the late 1980s, much remains of the pre-nationalisation railways. But modernisation continues. Here at Reading, this new station complex, located on what was once the site of Reading's Southern Station, dominates the scene. A major improvement in standards of travel came about with the introduction of the HST, still a prominent feature on the former GWR main line today. Twyford, and speed on our journey eastward increases. One fears that this view will in turn take its place in the history books. The threat of electrification with its overhead wires and gantries is ever present. But for the time being at least, the scene is unspoiled, save for the addition of a castle or king perhaps. Modern signs abound. In particular, the new Network Southeast station nameboards stand out like a sore thumb. But here again, much remains of a bygone era. The flavour is still distinctly Great Western. The feature perhaps least likely to change is the track layout, a legacy of Brunel's 7-foot gauge. Again, the pace quickens as we move nearer to London. As our HST recedes into the distance, we are set to move back in time. The purpose of our journey to the capital is to start our second journey with Richard Willis, back to the railways of 25 years ago. The familiar frontage of the Great Western Royal Hotel has changed very little. More than can be said for the motor cars. Moving inside, a hiss draws our eyes to the first of many steam locomotives we are destined to see on this trip, Pannier 9415. Castles and kings always seem to steal the limelight, but Paddington was host to many more humble engines. Halls were frequently employed on passenger trains, and 7920 has returned from servicing at Old Oak Common to take on a westbound express. By this time, modern taper boiler panniers were firmly in command of station pilot duties. Our attention is drawn back to Platform 3 as Coney Hall is about to depart for the west. We leave these spotters on Platform 8 and move to Didcot as Merchant Navy Orient Line drifts round the east curve with a Bournemouth express. As well as bullied Pacifics, BR Class 5s worked in from the southern region over the section from Reading to here at Oxford. By 1964, Western Region engines were being deliberately run down. Cleaners were apparently non-existent, steam leaks went unchecked, and nameplates disappeared. Away from Paddington, the older 5700 panniers were still common, and we find 9789 in the former LMS goods yard, loose shunting a wagon. By contrast, main line goods workings were often handled by large prairies. "6106 is hustling this short transfer freight towards Hinksey Yard. The diversion of many expresses from other routes to the Oxford line saw an increase in the appearance of bullied Pacifics, such as Heartland. Diverted in September 1962 from the Somerset and Dorset line, one of these trains was the Pines Express. A mixed rake of green and maroon coaches headed by a large tendered Southern Region Class 5 waits for the road beneath a typical Western Region bracket signal. Signals such as this are now but a memory, as are the then ever-present telegraph wires. Oxford Shed and a visiting Stanier 8F, no doubt just arrived from Hinksey Yard, keeps company with a Hall, now sadly bereft of her nameplates. Our old friend Conway Castle, still in BR service, heads a special train between Oxford and Banbury. Large marshalling yards existed at Banbury to handle the considerable traffic that passed to and from the Great Central Line. The Great Central also provided most of the through trains to the Southern Region, all still then steam-hauled. The departure of a modified Hall, 6996, allows us a comparison with the original Collet variety. Impney Hall is about to hand over her train of LNER vans to a Thompson B1 for transfer onto the Great Central. This cross-country traffic brought many LNER engines to Banbury. These scenes bring back happy memories as we are allowed into the cab of 61109. Her left-hand drive position contrasts sharply with the right-hand one of native Great Western engines. With a smile from the driver, the B1 departs for Woodford Halls. Gossington Hall brakes smartly to a halt with another train for the Great Central Line. It was not uncommon for halls to work as far as Leicester with Southern trains. South of Leamington we meet the Pines Express again, on this occasion headed by Crewe Castle. By 1963 the castles were in serious decline. They had lost much passenger work to the wave of diesel hydraulics and were often relegated to relief working. This single-chimneyed example has found employment on a 13-coach special as it races downhill towards Leamington. We follow on to Leamington as a large prairie runs light engine through the station. Next along, and working flat out to rush Hatton Bank with a rail tour, is Walton Grange. Whilst numerically greater than the heavily preserved manor class, not one Grange survived the slaughterous steam. Richard Willis captured the unique site of double-headed Granges when they arrived at Leamington to take over a rail tour. These well-respected engines were similar to the Halls but had smaller wheels, recovered from withdrawn Class 4300 moguls. Note the different types of tender as the two engines back into the upwards loop to await their train. Birmingham's much-loved Snow Hill station was a major casualty of the 1960s rationalisation programme. 20 years after its rundown, time has proved the folly of this blunder. It occupied a place in the hearts of Birmingham people. Sunny holidays started here. Friends and lovers met on its spacious platforms, and it was a wonderful place for train spotters. By now, Clun Castle had been preserved by Pat Whitehouse. In March 1967, together with Pendennis Castle, she performed Steam's last rites at Snow Hill. This event marked the end of through trains from London to Birkenhead, and we say farewell to the castles with the stirring sight of a single chimneyed example rushing the 1 in 100 Shifnal Bank. Wellington, a short way to the northwest, was the beginning of a network of GWR and LMS joint lines. It is here that we catch our first sight of the controversial Britannia class. Little loved by Western Region crews, these Pacifics performed creditably elsewhere. This engine, John of Gaunt, was initially allocated to the Eastern Region. Hereford was one of the joint line's major centres. The car park at Bars Court Station confirms our 25-year regression, and today these vehicles would be collector's items. By the time of our visit, Newport to Shrewsbury expresses were mostly in the hands of halls and castles. Social trends over the intervening years have made this fireman's cigarette much less acceptable. The Western's penultimate outpost at Chester, deep in London Midland territory, is the setting for this unusual combination of double-headed pannier tanks. They are to hand over their rail tour to a rear interloper, Peppercorn Pacific Blue Peter, an engine by now in great demand for such workings. We say our farewell to the Western as Blue Peter sets off from the first of BR's regions to abolish steam. At Chester in pre-grouping days, the Great Western met its sometime ally, the London and North Western Railway. The theme of our next journey is very much in keeping with this book, published by Ian Allen Limited. Many years have elapsed since Stanier Pacifics pounded their way along the West Coast main line, but thankfully we can relive those days by way of photographs and film. One of the West Coast main line's principal branches was to Holyhead, long an important link with Ireland. The LNWR invested heavily here, not just with the railway station, but they also developed the inner harbour. This was uniquely situated between the up and down platforms and saw tremendous activity in the days before mass air travel. The railway's many ferries and packet steamers plied between Holyhead and Dunleary, transporting people, cattle for the mainland's abattoirs, and most importantly, mail, hence the name of the principal rail service. This sort of activity can still be seen at Holyhead nowadays. On Anglesey, we find the longest station name in the UK, understandably shortened to Llanfair PG by BR staff. Black 5 5307 makes its last stop on the island with a local from Holyhead. The ancient walls of Conway Castle seem to dwarf a Black 5, all 63 feet of it. But the walls do provide a magnificent vantage point to observe this classmate. The train almost fully comprised of Great Western coaches. A diversion to the Conway Valley branch in the 1950s provides an almost unique view of a Stanier Class 3 262 tank in action. While to the north, Llandudno Junction's other branch led to Llandudno itself. Here, a superb terminus, where thousands of holidays began. These recent arrivals will have enjoyed magnificent views of the North Wales coast, the final leg of their journey having commenced at Crewe behind 70051. As the Britannia backs out with her recently arrived train, our cameo is completed as 5380 heads east with homeward-bound holidaymakers. Near Colwyn Bay, an 8F slogs uphill towards Penmaenros Tunnel with a heavy freight train. Our next location is the border city of Carlisle, northern limit of the London Midland region. The impressive station was built by a joint committee and served the LNWR together with the Caledonian, North Eastern and Midland Railway, amongst others, in pre-grouping days. Concentration of traffic to and from Scotland gave Carlisle a train service far in excess of its own requirements. At the time of our arrival, things seemed fairly quiet, with a BR standard tank simmering at the head of a local train. But the platforms are full as the crew of Jubilee Mars prepare for their assault on the Settle and Carlisle line to Leeds. While at the north end of the station, City of Salford begins its 112-mile journey to Glasgow. Typical of the era, 6257 was far from immaculate, while this fellow Pacific is even grimier. Following their concentration on the London Midland, Britannia's became a common sight at Carlisle. Westmoreland, before the advent of the M6 motorway. This was the main road to Scotland. These were the days when Scottish rail traffic was laboriously hauled over one of Britain's most notorious inclines. Shap summit lies to the south of the station, and that's the direction we head off in for some action. This Black 5's partially fitted freight is banked by one of T-Bay Shed's Class 4 tanks. The occupants of Scout Green signal box had become accomplished hosts to photographers by the 1960s. These spectacular views will indicate why. Northbound trains faced the hardest task, but were helped to gain speed by the stretch of line through the Lune Gorge between Low Gill and T-Bay. Close to Dillicar Troughs, a Black 5 rushes towards T-Bay with a fitted freight. By 1965, much of the remaining steam-hauled traffic was in the hands of Stanier Class 5s. A year earlier, Jubilees were still in evidence, albeit reduced to parcels and fitted freight workings. As were Royal Scots, but also demoted. After this final view, we have to leave the northern fells behind. From Lancaster we reach Preston, the scene of frantic activity at holiday times when normal West Coast traffic was swelled by hundreds of trains carrying holiday makers to Blackpool. The arrival of Britannia Polar Star presents an opportunity to visually compare the simple Riddle's two-cylinder mixed traffic Pacific with Stanier's larger and more complex Ultimate Express design. The near-empty platforms testify to the everyday nature of the occasion. Only a young family bid farewell to the Lakes Express. No sooner has 70026 got underway than City of Leeds sets off in apparent pursuit. At Stockport, double-chimneyed Jubilee Bahamas sets off for Manchester. By 1964, many Jubilees had been withdrawn or were in store. Enthusiasts who wished to find them in happier circumstances began to descend on Leeds, with engines such as New South Wales still at work on services to Manchester. The heart of the LNWR, Crewe. Sir William Stanier's namesake glides powerfully away with the Down Express, whilst Argenti provides complete contrast with a short transfer freight. To the enthusiast, Crewe North Shed was almost impregnable. Many would-be visitors never got further than the footbridge entrance. However, we are to enjoy an uninterrupted tour of the shed. Starfind amongst an incomparable array of Pacifics. While 71,000 had a rather checkered service career, the visually similar but far less complex Britannias fared much better. It might seem just like yesterday, but scenes such as this will never be repeated. While designed at Derby, all 55 Britannias were built at Crewe, the last 10 with the larger BR1E tender. The shed itself was for many years home to the largest allocation of engines on the LMS, and closed in 1965. Our final view at 5A is provided by City of Birmingham. Recently overhauled but soon to be withdrawn, she reverses away to Crewe station to take over an express. Tamworth, 1963. Sir William Stanier races south under newly erected wires with a Glasgow to London special, to be followed by a BR Class 4 mogul working empty coaching stock. The Trent Valley Line provided a bypass which allowed many West Coast expresses to avoid the congestion of Birmingham, our next port of call. At New Street in 1964, Jubilees such as Jutland could still be seen heading service trains. While only 4 months from withdrawal, City of Nottingham leaves with a rail tour. Back on the Trent Valley at Nuneaton, a princess meets a Type 4. An Ivat mogul drifts past on its way to the shed. Nuneaton provided a magnificent location for observing West Coast expresses at high speed. As well as Royal Scots, there were Britannias. But the stars of the show were still Stanier's Duchesses. The pace slows as 52.25 pauses with a semi-fast. Meanwhile, a 350 horsepower shunter pushes wagons over the hump in the up yard. The Black Five's departure is our cue to move further south to Rugby, where a rust-coloured Jubilee awaits us. .5696's departure allows us a view of her Fowler tender. With safety valves feathering, City of Stoke-on-Trent coasts downhill towards Rugby at Hill Morton. Our last view of the West Coast main line without overhead wires, as a Britannia tears through the Northamptonshire countryside near Long Buckleby. Steam's impending demise is forecast on the unusual three-track section near Shilton. With overhead wires firmly in place, a Jubilee on a fitted freight is overtaken by an express headed by a Type 4 diesel. Of Britain's pre-nationalisation companies, it was the Southern Railway that led the field in electrification. That is but one part of a fascinating story chronicled in this David and Charles publication, compiled by the highly successful partnership of David St. John Thomas and Patrick Whitehouse. Waterloo, major terminus for the Southern's third rail EMU commuter network, also the gateway for holiday journeys to the southwest. While the Southern might have popularized alternatives to steam, they seemed happy to stick with it if appropriate. As late as 1967, steam locomotives worked from here in daily service. For a privileged few, its bullied Pacific-hauled boat trains provided the starting point for the transatlantic liners, then still operating from Southampton docks. Unrebuilt West Country Seaton makes a relatively clean start with a down boat train. Next, an arrival with Merchant Navy Ellerman lines. This aspect of 35029 is no longer available to us. Meanwhile, wreathed in steam, unrebuilt Battle of Britain 249 Squadron departs. The lack of slipping might be due to assistance from the carriage Pilot, a BR Class 3 tank. By 1963, bullied Pacifics virtually monopolized steam traffic at the station. 213 Squadron was one of only 17 of the 44-strong Battle of Britain class to be rebuilt into this modified form. The squadron's Bournemouth Express is followed out by another rebuild, West Country Woolacoo. Shape and position of nameplates provides the easiest means of telling a rebuilt light Pacific from a merchant navy. This grimy example of the latter heads a train composed almost entirely of bullied coaches, whilst Pioneer West Country Exeter arrives to take up its next duty. Following the example of Elder Dempster Line's firemen, we wave farewell to Waterloo and follow on to Weybridge, where this BR Class 4 on goods duties precedes the spectacle of these expresses speeding south through London's suburbs. Winter sunlight silhouettes a West Country as it runs light engine through the woodlands near Woking, while further west at Purbright, a sister heads away from London. Shortly afterwards, another rebuilt light Pacific, Boscastle, rushes towards the capital with a short express. This stretch of the Southwestern Main Line deserved its nickname, the Racetrack, with elder Dempster lines maintaining tradition as she charges through Fleet. The Southern's BR Class 5s also turned in spirited performances. Hook was another favourite location for recording the bullied Pacifics at high speed. Filmed in 1964, this location provides further original engines, but the rebuilds were ever present. Contrasting with clean coaches, a somewhat grimy unrebuilt Pacific Wilton calls at Basingstoke. This was the junction where trains for the north, such as the Pines Express, diverged from the Waterloo line. We pause as 73029 rushes towards London with an extremely mixed rake of coaches. The arrival of Tamar Valley with an up train precedes the approach of an unusual visitor. Once again, it is A2 Pacific, Blue Peter. It is August 1966, and Blue Peter is far from her former base on the Scottish region with a rail tour. West of Basingstoke, the Salisbury line diverged from the Southampton line under the flyover at Worthing Junction. Holland Africa Lines works easily, heading a lightweight express. Closely followed on the up Southampton line by a more heavily laden 73065. A detour towards Salisbury finds Royal Mail charging eastward at Whitchurch. Moving on, we reach Tunnel Junction outside Salisbury, where we find another foreigner, A4 Kingfisher. Salisbury became the collecting point for withdrawn engines at the end of steam on the southern region. With only a month to go in BR service, Blackmore Vale draws a special train into this famous station. Eastleigh Shed in its last month of steam operation. Saunton stands outside the shed ready for her next turn of duty. Meanwhile, the crew of 76066 trim their coal. Just inside the shed, a West Country receives what will probably be the last repairs in its working life. Now the final leg of our journey to Bournemouth, as a BR Class 5 races through Hinton Admiral Station. Tamar Valley forges up the bank out of Christchurch towards Hinton Admiral with an express for Waterloo. While westbound, Lyme Regis takes advantage of the final fast stretch of line before Bournemouth. Shortly after, Westward Ho, following its own directions, drifts lazily downhill with a stopping train for Bournemouth. In complete contrast, Holland Africa lines will need some serious braking to comply with the permanent speed restriction at Christchurch. Those blue and grey coaches signal the final impending demise of steam. 2 months more and Holland Africa lines would be but a memory along with Bournemouth's busy steam shed. Today, the concept of this shed, with its attendant noise and pollution, existing in the centre of a thriving holiday resort, is impossible. While the schools, long associated with the line, had disappeared by the time of our visit, we close with a view of 30935 abandoned to its fate. Thankfully, however, somehow, steam lives on.